The council chamber stretched 500 meters across, carved from a single asteroid and polished until the walls gleamed like black mirrors. 200 species had gathered here today, their representatives sitting in carefully arranged pods that accommodated everything from methane breathers to crystalline beings that communicated through light pulses. Captain Dahan, Kim stood in the observation deck above, watching through the transparent floor. His uniform was pressed and perfect, his posture straight, but his hands were clenched behind his back. Next to him, Ambassador Una Park stared down at the assembly with tired eyes. She had spent 3 months in those chambers, defending humanity. 3 months of speeches and evidence and pleading. The voting had started an hour ago. The results were already clear. Dahan could see it in the way the alien delegates moved. The Thornian representative, a creature that looked like a walking tree, swayed in what he knew was satisfaction. The Kelvin ambassador, encased in its refrigeration suit, pulsed with a blue glow that meant agreement. Even the species that had traded with Earth for decades were voting against them. How many? Dahan asked quietly. Una didn't look at him. 176 against. 24 for. They're not even pretending it's close. The observation deck was supposed to be soundproof, but Dahan swore he could hear the cheering from below. He watched as the High Chancellor, a massive amphibian called Velcor, raised his webbed hands for silence. The translation device in Dahan's ear crackled to life. The vote is concluded. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Union. All human settlements in shared territory must be evacuated within 2 standard years. All treaties are void. All trade agreements are terminated. This decision is final. Una finally turned away from the window. Her face showed nothing, but Dahan had known her for 15 years. He could see the anger in the set of her jaw, the way her shoulders were just a little too rigid. They're afraid, she said. That's what this is. They're terrified of us, Dahan nodded. The frontier wars had proven that humans could fight. When the pirate coalition had swept through the outer systems, burning colonies and enslaving populations, the Galactic Union had done nothing. They had held meetings and formed committees and written strongly worded letters. Humanity had mobilized its fleets and ended the threat in 6 months. The galaxy had watched humans board pirate vessels in hand-to-hand combat. They had seen human soldiers fight in conditions that would kill most other species. They had witnessed human commanders make decisions that turned impossible battles into victories, and it had scared them. Come on, Dahan said. Let's get back to the ship. The diplomatic vessel Persistence waited in orbit around Vela Prime, a sleek craft designed more for appearance than combat. Dahan's crew snapped to attention as he entered the bridge. His first officer, a young lieutenant named Hanako, approached immediately. Captain, we're receiving transmissions from Earth. The Secretary General wants to speak with the ambassador as soon as possible. Una nodded. Conference room, now. 5 minutes later, they were staring at a holographic projection of Earth's leadership. The Secretary General, an elderly man named Marcus Webb, looked like he had aged 10 years in the past 3 months. Ambassador Park, Captain Kim, I assume the news is bad. Worse than bad, sir, Una replied. It was a landslide. They want us gone within 2 years. Complete severance from the Union. The hologram flickered as Webb consulted with someone off-screen. When he turned back, his expression had changed. The weariness was gone, replaced by something harder. We're convening an emergency session of the World Assembly. Every nation, every colony, every human settlement will vote on our response. But I can tell you right now what that response is going to be. Dahan leaned forward. Sir, if they want us gone, we'll leave. But we're not going to crawl away like wounded animals. We're going to show them exactly what humanity is capable of when we're not held back by their rules and their fear. The hologram cut out. Dahan and Una sat in silence for a moment. He's talking about a complete withdrawal, Una said finally. Not just from shared space. From everything. Every treaty, every trade route, every diplomatic connection. And then what? Una smiled for the first time that day. It wasn't a happy smile. Then we build something better. News of the banishment spread through human space within hours. Dahan had expected panic, protest, maybe even riots. Instead, there was something else. Anger, yes, but also a strange sort of determination. He watched the news feeds from Earth. In Seoul, crowds gathered in the streets, but they weren't mourning. They were chanting. In New York, the stock markets actually went up. In the colony cities on Mars and Europa, People lined up outside recruiting offices. The World Assembly vote took 16 hours. When it was finished, the result was unanimous. Every human nation, every colony, every settlement agreed. They would leave Galactic Union space completely. They would take everything with them. And they would never ask permission to be great again. Daehan received his new orders 3 days later. The Persistence would return to Earth to be refitted. He was being promoted to Commodore and given command of a battle group. His mission was to oversee the military evacuation of human forces from Union space. Before they left Vela Prime, Yuna insisted on one last transmission to the Galactic Council. Daehan stood beside her as she recorded the message. Members of the Galactic Council, you have made your decision clear. Humanity accepts your verdict. We will leave your space, your territory, and your union. But understand this, we are not leaving because we are weak. We are not leaving because we are defeated. We are leaving because you have shown us that we were never truly welcome here. She paused, and Daehan saw steel in her eyes. You feared what humanity might become if we stayed. You should fear what we will become now that you forced us to leave. We came to you as friends, as partners, as allies. We offered our strength, our innovation, our courage. You rejected all of it. One day you will realize that was a mistake. And when that day comes, remember that you made this choice. The transmission ended. Yuna stood and straightened her uniform. Take us home, Captain. Daehan gave the order, and the Persistence turned away from Vela Prime. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued their celebrations, confident they had eliminated a threat to their comfortable, stagnant civilization. They had no idea what they had actually done. They had unleashed humanity, and humanity was about to show the galaxy what it meant to underestimate the species that had clawed its way up from Earth. 18 months after the vote, Kepler Station hung in space like a wounded giant. The massive structure had once been humanity's largest trade hub in Galactic Union territory. A city in space where 30,000 humans had lived and worked. Now it was being systematically destroyed piece by piece. Engineer Ji-Wan Choi floated through the station's central corridor, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor. Behind her, 36 work crews moved with precise efficiency, cutting through walls, removing panels, stripping out every component that could be salvaged. The sound of plasma torches and hydraulic tools echoed through the emptying halls. How much longer on Section 7? Ji-Wan asked into her comm unit. 48 hours, ma'am, came the reply from her crew chief. We're pulling the last of the medical equipment now. The hydroponics bay is already gutted. Ji-Wan checked her tablet. Section 7 had contained the most advanced medical facilities outside of Earth itself, technology that had saved countless alien lives during the Union years. Now every scanner, every surgery unit, every diagnostic machine was being carefully packed into cargo containers and loaded onto transport ships. Good market for structural demolition once you're clear. She moved to an observation window and looked out at the fleet. Hundreds of ships surrounded Kepler Station, from massive cargo haulers to small salvage vessels. They looked like insects stripping a carcass, and in a way, that's exactly what they were doing. Humanity was leaving nothing behind. A young engineer named Bo Young approached her, tablet in hand. Ma'am, the Kelvin Trade Authority is requesting permission to dock. They want to negotiate for some of the equipment we're removing. Ji-Wan didn't even look up from her work. Denied. Orders are clear. We don't sell, trade, or donate anything. It all goes home. But ma'am, they're offering to pay triple the market value for the fusion reactors. That's enough money to build 2 new stations. Now Ji-Wan did look at him. And what happens when we sell them our reactors? They reverse engineer them. They learn from them. They benefit from decades of human research and development, all while they celebrate kicking us out of their club. She shook her head. No deal. If they wanted our technology, they shouldn't have voted to banish us. Boyoung nodded and walked away. Ji-Won went back to her checklist. The fusion reactors would be removed last, right before they collapsed the station's main support structure. In 3 months, Kepler Station would be nothing but debris and bad memories. 3 systems away, Admiral Minho Kang stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching his fleet prepare for departure. 26 warships hung in formation around the Arcturus defense platform, a military installation that had protected this sector for 40 years. Minho was 63 years old, a veteran of the frontier wars and a dozen smaller conflicts. He had spent most of his career working alongside alien allies, training with their forces, sharing tactical knowledge. Now he was overseeing the withdrawal of every human military asset from Union space. "Status report," he ordered. His tactical officer, Commander Sunho Han, brought up the displays. "All personnel have been evacuated. Equipment is 94% loaded. The remaining 6% is heavy artillery that requires specialized transport. Those ships arrive in 6 hours, and the station itself, rigged for demolition. We'll trigger it as we leave the system." Minho nodded. The Arcturus platform had cost billions to build, and it had saved millions of lives by deterring pirates and raiders. But orders were orders. Humanity was taking everything mobile and destroying everything else. The galaxy would get no benefit from the sacrifices humans had made. A communication request came through from the Thornian planetary government. Minho almost ignored it, but curiosity made him accept. The Thornian governor appeared on screen, his bark-like face twisted in what might have been concern. "Admiral Kang, please, we need to discuss the defense platform. Without it, this system will be vulnerable to attack. Surely we can reach some arrangement." Minho's expression didn't change. The defense platform was built with human resources, human technology, and human blood. "You voted to expel us from the Union. That vote had consequences. But Admiral, the pirates will return. Our world cannot defend itself without. Then I suggest you petition the Galactic Council for protection. That's what they're there for, isn't it? Or was it easier to let humans do the fighting while you sat safe behind our guns?" The Thornian governor's branches trembled. "You're condemning innocent people to death." "No," Minho said quietly. "You condemned them when you voted to banish the only species willing to defend you. We offered our protection freely. You rejected it. Good luck, Governor." He cut the transmission. Sunho looked at him. "That was harsh, sir. That was necessary. They need to understand that actions have consequences. For 40 years we protected them. We fought their battles. We died for their safety, and they thanked us by voting us out." Minho turned back to the view screen. "Let them learn what the galaxy is really like without humanity keeping the monsters at bay." On the planet Hestia, in the Gamma sector, a human colony of 8,000 people prepared to leave the world they had called home for 3 generations. The colony director, a woman named Yunji Choi, stood in the central square and watched families load their possessions onto transport vehicles. Children who had never seen Earth played in the dirt for the last time. Elderly colonists who had built this place with their own hands wept quietly as they packed up their lives. But there was no talk of staying, no debate about the decision. The orders had come from Earth and they would obey. A Kelvin delegation arrived in the afternoon, offering to buy the colony infrastructure. The buildings, the power systems, the agricultural facilities, all of it worth millions. Chunji refused without even considering it. "But why?" the Kelvin ambassador asked, its voice synthesized through its suit speakers. "You're leaving anyway. Why let it go to waste?" Yunji looked at the ambassador with cold eyes. "Because we built this colony with our sweat and our dreams. We turned a dead rock into a living world, and you think you can just buy it from us after you threw us out?" She shook her head. "No, you want this colony? You'll have to build it yourself, just like we did." The last transport lifted off 2 weeks later. Yunji was on it, watching through the window as the colony dwindled below them. Just before they reached orbit, she gave the signal. Charges planted throughout the colony infrastructure detonated in sequence, collapsing buildings and destroying systems. The colony that had taken 70 years to build was reduced to rubble in minutes. Some of the colonists cried. Others cheered. Yunji felt nothing but grim satisfaction. They would rebuild somewhere else, somewhere beyond the reach of the species that had rejected them. Back at Galactic Council headquarters on Vela Prime, Councillor Talvin reviewed the reports with growing unease. The reptilian diplomat had voted against the banishment, one of only 24 who had. Now he was watching humanity's response with increasing concern. "They're not just leaving," he said to his aide. "They're erasing themselves from Union space entirely." The reports were all the same. Human stations dismantled, military installations destroyed, technology stripped and removed. Even the small things. The human-built schools on multi-species worlds closed and demolished. The human medical clinics that had provided free care to aliens emptied and destroyed. The communication relay stations that had improved Union-wide communication, shut down and salvaged. "Perhaps that's for the best," his aide suggested. "A clean break." Talvin shook his head. "You don't understand. Look at the numbers. Look at the scale of their evacuation fleet. Look at the organization, the planning, the execution. He pulled up images of the human convoy routes. This isn't a retreat. This is a military operation. They're not running away. They're repositioning. To where? That was the question that kept Talavin awake at night. Human ships were leaving Union space, yes, but they weren't going back to Earth. The tracking data showed them heading to the outer rim, to regions of space that the Union had barely explored. I don't know, Talavin admitted, but I think we're going to regret forcing them to answer that question. Across the galaxy, humanity moved like a tide, pulling back from every corner of Union space. It took coordination on a scale never before attempted. Millions of people, billions of tons of equipment, trillions of credits worth of technology, all moving in synchronized exodus. And not once did they ask for help. Not once did they beg to stay. They simply packed up and left, taking with them every gift they had given, every innovation they had shared, every protective force they had deployed. The galaxy watched and called it good riddance. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. 5 years had passed since humanity left Galactic Union space. 5 years of silence from beyond the border. 5 years of increasing problems that nobody wanted to talk about. Captain Hee-Jin Lee sat in the command chair of the scout ship Horizon's Edge, staring at the star field ahead. Behind her, the border marker beacon blinked its steady warning. Unauthorized entry beyond this point. She had been staring at that beacon for 3 days, building up the courage to cross it. Final systems check, she ordered. Her crew moved through the routine, checking sensors, weapons, engines. They were a small team of 7, hand-picked by Hee-Jin for their skills and their ability to keep secrets. Because this mission was not authorized by the Galactic Council. In fact, if the Council found out about it, Hee-Jin would lose her commission and probably face criminal charges. But she had to know. The trade routes that ran through her sector had become ghost towns. Ships that once carried goods between human and alien worlds sat idle in dock. Entire economies were collapsing because the human trade network had vanished overnight. And nobody in the Council wanted to admit that they had made a mistake. All systems green, Captain, her pilot reported. A young woman named Hana, barely 25, but one of the best pilots Hee-Jin had ever seen. Take us across. The Horizon's Edge slipped past the beacon, its stealth systems engaged. They were technically in neutral space now, the buffer zone between Union territory and whatever lay beyond. But everyone knew this was where humanity had gone. The question was, what had they found out here? For 6 days they saw nothing. Empty space, distant stars, the occasional asteroid field. Hee-Jin began to wonder if the humans had simply vanished, scattered to the cosmic winds. Then on the 7th day, Sunho Han called out from the science station. Captain, I'm picking up something. Massive energy signature bearing 270. Hee-Jin leaned forward. Show me. The view screen changed, zooming in on a distant point of light. As the image resolved, Hee-Jin felt her breath catch in her throat. It was a space station. But not like any station she had ever seen. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of Kepler Station had been. The design was human. She recognized the aesthetic, but it was wrong somehow. More advanced. More elegant. The station glowed with power, surrounded by dozens of smaller vessels moving in organized patterns. Where did they get the resources to build something like that? Hana whispered. Sunho was frantically working his console. Captain, I'm detecting multiple stations. Not just this one. There are at least 7 within scanner range, and I'm picking up planetary signatures that suggest active terraforming operations. Terraforming? That technology is still experimental. Nobody's successfully terraformed a world in less than a century. Apparently humans have. Sunho brought up the data. This planet, designation Delta 7 in our charts, was a barren rock when we last surveyed it 8 years ago. Now it's showing oxygen atmosphere, liquid water oceans, and biological readings consistent with Earth-type vegetation. Hee-Jin stared at the numbers. That's impossible. You can't terraform a planet in 5 years. They did. The Horizon's Edge crept closer, staying hidden in the shadow of a gas giant. What they saw over the next few hours changed everything Hee-Jin thought she knew about humanity. The space stations were just the beginning. Massive factory ships floated in orbit around asteroid fields, processing raw materials at a rate that should have been impossible. Mining operations on a scale that made Union efforts look like children playing in sandboxes. Transport vessels moving in endless streams between facilities, carrying resources and finished goods. And the ships, military vessels that made the old human fleet look primitive, sleek hulls covered in what looked like adaptive armor, weapon systems that Sun Ho couldn't even identify, drive signatures that suggested speeds far beyond what Union technology could achieve. How? Hana asked, voicing what they were all thinking. How did they advance this much in just 5 years? Sunho had been analyzing the data, running calculations. When he looked up, his face was pale. I think I understand. When humanity was part of the Union, they had to follow Union regulations. Slow, careful research approved by committees. Technology sharing agreements that limited independent development. Safety protocols that prevented risky experimentation. And now they don't. Hyejin finished. Now they don't, Sunho agreed. They've unleashed their full innovative potential. No committees to slow them down. No regulations to restrict them. No need to share their discoveries with species that might be competitors. He brought up more data. And look at this. I'm detecting mineral signatures that don't match anything from Union space. I think they're trading with civilizations beyond our borders. Species we've never contacted either because they were too far away or because the Council deemed them too dangerous. Hyejin sat back in her chair, processing the implications. The Galactic Council had assumed humanity would wither without access to Union markets and technology. Instead, humanity had found new markets, developed better technology, and built an empire that made the Union look stagnant by comparison. We need to get closer, she decided. I want detailed scans of everything. Ship designs, station layouts, technology signatures, all of it. They spent 2 more weeks in human space carefully mapping and recording. They watched construction vessels build a new station in days using techniques that should have taken months. They observed mining operations that extracted rare minerals with perfect efficiency. They even spotted what looked like research facilities, where humans were pushing the boundaries of physics itself. But the most disturbing thing was the military presence. Every system they visited had defense platforms, advanced weapon systems that tracked the horizon's edge even through its stealth field, though they never fired. Patrol ships that moved in perfect formation, their crews clearly trained to levels that exceeded Union standards. And in one system, they glimpsed something that made Hyejin order an immediate retreat. A massive shipyard constructing vessels that could only be warships. Dozens of them in various stages of completion. They're building a fleet, Hana said quietly. A big one. To defend what they've built, Sunho suggested. They know the galaxy isn't safe. But Hyejin wasn't so sure. Those ships looked less like defensive platforms and more like instruments of power projection. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was preparing for something. The journey back to Union space took 8 days. Hyejin spent most of that time writing her report, trying to find words that would make the Council understand the magnitude of what she had discovered. When they finally crossed back into Union territory, she transmitted her findings directly to the Council headquarters on Vela Prime, marked highest priority. 3 days later, she received a summons to appear before the Council in person. The Council chamber felt different this time. The celebration that had marked humanity's banishment 5 years ago was gone, replaced by an air of nervous tension. Hyejin stood in the center of the chamber, her data displayed on screens all around her. High Chancellor Velkor, looking even older than she remembered, studied the images with rheumy eyes. This data has been verified? Yes, High Chancellor. I verified it myself multiple times. Everything in that report is accurate. Counselor Vexara, the insectoid who had been one of humanity's strongest critics, clicked her mandibles in agitation. This is impossible. No species could advance this quickly. The data must be falsified. It's not falsified, Hyejin said firmly. I saw it with my own eyes. Humanity has built an empire out there, and it's more advanced than anything in Union space. Counselor Talavan leaned forward, his reptilian features grave. Captain Lee, in your professional opinion, does humanity pose a military threat to the Union? Hyejin hesitated. This was the question that terrified her. Yes, Counselor. If humanity wanted to, they could conquer half of Union space within a year. Their technology is superior, their ships are better, and they have resources we can't match. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Species that had cheered humanity's banishment 5 years ago now faced the consequences of their decision. They had created a rival, a power that existed outside their control and had every reason to hate them. Velcor raised his hands for silence. We will not discuss this publicly. This information is classified at the highest level. If word gets out that humanity has become this powerful, it will cause panic throughout Union space. Talavin objected. High Chancellor, we cannot hide from this. We need to address what we've done. What we've done, Vexara hissed, is protect the Union from a dangerous species. If they've used their exile to become a threat, that only proves we were right to banish them. But even as she spoke, Hyejin could see the doubt in the other counselors' faces. They had banished humanity out of fear, and that fear had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now they faced something far more terrifying than anything they had imagined. A human civilization that had grown beyond them, that didn't need them, and that had no reason to forgive them. Hyejin left the council chamber that day knowing that the galaxy had changed forever. The balance of power had shifted. Humanity was no longer a junior member of the galactic community, begging for acceptance. They were a force unto themselves, and the galaxy would soon learn what that meant. 10 years after humanity's banishment, the Vryn swarm entered Galactic Union space from the galactic core. Nobody knew where they came from originally. The first reports were confused, contradictory. A mining colony in the Tertius system had gone silent. When scouts arrived, they found nothing but empty buildings and strange organic residue coating every surface. The colonists were gone, along with most of the planet's biomass. Within a month, 4 more systems fell silent. Admiral Taeyang Park, commander of the Human Border Station Watchtower 7, reviewed the intelligence reports with growing concern. The station floated in the neutral zone between human and Union space, one of a dozen monitoring posts that humanity maintained to watch their former neighbors. The data was fragmentary, but Taeyang had spent 40 years in military service. He knew what an invasion looked like. Bring up everything we have on these Vryn, he ordered. His intelligence officer, Commander Boyong Shin, pulled up what little information they had gathered. Images of creatures that looked like nightmares. Segmented bodies covered in chitinous armor, multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp claws, heads dominated by mandibles that could crush steel. But the most disturbing part was how they operated. They're a hive mind, Boyong explained. No individual intelligence, just a collective consciousness spread across millions of bodies. They consume organic matter and use it to create more Vryn. Every person they kill, every animal they devour, becomes raw material for their expansion. How is the Union responding? Boyong brought up tactical displays. They've mobilized their fleet. About 300 ships, mostly cruisers and frigates. They're forming a defensive line at the Helios sector, trying to contain the Vryn advance. Taeyang studied the formation and felt his stomach tighten. That won't work. They're spreading their forces too thin, trying to defend everything. The Vryn will punch through the weakest point and pour into Union space like water through a crack. Should we inform them? They won't listen. We're the enemy now, remember? The dangerous humans who had to be banished for the safety of the galaxy. Taeyang's voice was bitter. Let them learn on their own. Over the next 3 months, the Union fleet fought desperately against the Vryn advance. And they lost. Badly. The problem was experience. The Union had enjoyed relative peace for decades, with only minor pirate raids and border skirmishes to deal with. Most of their admirals had never commanded in a real war. Their tactics were outdated, their crews undertrained, their strategies too cautious. The Vryn, meanwhile, fought with the single-minded efficiency of a hive mind. They didn't fear death because they had no concept of individual survival. They swarmed Union ships in overwhelming numbers, accepting losses that would have broken any other species, because those losses meant nothing to the collective. System after system fell. 12 in the first 3 months. 20 by the end of the first year. The Union fleet retreated again and again, trying to regroup, trying to find a strategy that worked. But every battle went the same way. Initial success, then overwhelming numbers, then desperate retreat. Taeyang watched it all from Watchtower 7, feeling torn. Part of him wanted to help. These were people dying, billions of lives at risk. But another part of him remembered the vote, remembered the contempt in the council's faces as they banished humanity. His senior staff gathered in the conference room to debate their response. Boyung was firmly against intervention. They threw us out, she argued. They made it clear we weren't welcome in their precious union. Now they expect us to save them. No. Let them handle their own problems. But if the union falls, the Vrin won't stop at the border, countered Lieutenant Jiwon, the station's tactical officer. Eventually they'll reach human space. We can either fight them now while they're engaged with the union, or later when they're stronger. Taeyang listened to both sides, but he already knew what he would recommend. This wasn't just about the union. This was about the kind of species humanity wanted to be. He sent an encrypted message to Earth, to the human assembly. The union is dying. The Vrin swarm is destroying everything in its path. Current projections give the union 6 months before complete collapse. Request guidance, do we intervene? The response came 36 hours later. It was short and coldly pragmatic. Monitor the situation. If the union requests assistance, bring the matter to full assembly vote. We do not offer help to those who do not ask. So Taeyang waited, and watched, and counted the dying systems. On Vela Prime, the Galactic Council met in emergency session. The chamber that had once rung with celebration now echoed with panic and recrimination. High Chancellor Velcor had died in a Vrin attack on a refugee convoy, and the leadership had fallen to Councillor Talavin by default. The reptilian diplomat looked out at the assembled species and saw fear in every face. The confident superiority that had marked humanity's banishment was gone, replaced by desperate terror. We need reinforcements, Councillor Vexara was saying, her mandibles clicking rapidly. We need to conscript civilian vessels, arm merchant ships, anything to increase our numbers. Numbers mean nothing against the Vrin, Talvin replied wearily. They've proven that. We've thrown 300 ships at them, and we've lost half that number. More ships with untrained crews will just mean more deaths. Then what do you suggest? Another councillor demanded. That we simply give up? Let them consume everything? Talavin looked around the chamber, at species that had once seemed so powerful, so secure. Now they looked like frightened children. There is one option, he said quietly. We could ask humanity for help. The chamber exploded in protests. The idea was unthinkable. Admit weakness to the species they had banished? Ask for help from those they had called too dangerous, too unpredictable? The humiliation would be unbearable. They would demand concessions, Vexara hissed. They would use our weakness against us. Perhaps, Talvin agreed. Or perhaps they would help because it's the right thing to do. We'll never know unless we ask. The debate raged for hours. But as reports came in of more lost systems, more civilian casualties, more retreating fleets, the opposition slowly crumbled. Pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. Finally, with only Vexara and a handful of others dissenting, the council voted to send a request for military assistance to humanity. Talavin himself recorded the message. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. To the government of humanity, the Galactic Union faces an existential threat. The Vrin swarm is destroying our civilization. Our fleets are in retreat. Our people are dying. We were wrong to banish you. We were wrong about many things. We ask humbly for your help. Not because we deserve it, but because billions of innocent lives hang in the balance, please. The message was transmitted to Earth, and then they waited. On Watchtower 7, Taeyang received notification that the request had arrived. He pulled up the recording and watched Talvin's plea. The proud counselor looked broken, exhausted, desperate. Taeyang forwarded the message to Earth with his own recommendation. They have asked. I believe we should answer. The human assembly debated for 3 days. The arguments were heated, passionate. Some wanted revenge, wanted to watch the Union burn for their arrogance. Others argued for humanitarian intervention, for saving innocent lives regardless of politics. In the end, President Yoonji Choi addressed the assembly with words that would define humanity's response. 10 years ago, they told us we were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent. They were afraid of what we might become. Well, they were right to be afraid, but wrong about why. We didn't become monsters. We became something they couldn't control, and that terrified them. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. Now they face real monsters, real danger, real violence, and they've learned that their comfortable, peaceful civilization was built on the foundation of species like humanity, keeping the monsters at bay. They rejected us and now they're paying the price. But here's the thing about humanity. We don't abandon people to die, even people who wronged us, even people who feared us, even people who cast us out. Because if we did, we would become the monsters they feared. So yes, we will help them, but not as supplicants begging to be let back in. Not as junior partners grateful for the privilege. We help them as equals, as a power in our own right, making our own choices for our own reasons. The vote was unanimous. The Human Assembly authorized military intervention against the Vryn swarm. Admiral Minho Kang, now commanding humanity's First Fleet, received his orders with grim satisfaction. He had spent 10 years building this fleet, training crews, developing tactics. Now he would show the galaxy what humanity could do when it didn't hold back. All ships, he ordered. Prepare for combat operations. We're going to war. The First Fleet began its deployment toward Union space. 300 warships more advanced than anything the Union had seen. Crews trained to perfection, weapon systems that would turn the tide of battle. Humanity was coming to save the civilization that had rejected them, but they were coming on their own terms. The Battle of Vela Prime would be remembered as the day the galaxy learned what humanity had become. Admiral Minho Kang stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display with cold calculation. Before him, the remnants of the Union fleet fought desperately to defend their capital world. 36 ships, battered and exhausted, faced down a Vryn swarm of thousands. The Union was losing. All ships, battle formation Omega, Minho ordered. Engage on my mark. The First Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 300 human warships appeared like ghosts from the void, their hulls gleaming with adaptive armor that shifted colors like oil on water. The ships moved with precision that made the Union vessels look clumsy by comparison. On the Union flagship Defiant, Admiral Vexara watched the human fleet arrive with mixed feelings of relief and humiliation. She had opposed asking humanity for help until the very end. Now her survival depended on the species she had voted to banish. Human fleet, this is Admiral Vexara. We are grateful for your assistance. Please coordinate your attack with our tactical command. Minho's response was polite but firm. Negative, Admiral. We will handle this. Pull your ships back to defensive positions around Vela Prime. But we can still fight. You've done enough fighting. Now let us show you how it's done. The human fleet surged forward. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies for generations. The Vryn swarm, which had overwhelmed every Union fleet it faced, suddenly found itself fighting an enemy that understood war on a level they couldn't match. Human ships moved in coordinated groups, their targeting systems linked through quantum networks that allowed them to function as a single organism. When one ship fired, a dozen others adjusted their aim to maximize damage. Commodore Daehan Kim commanded the vanguard, leading his battle group directly into the thickest concentration of Vryn vessels. His flagship, Persistence, had been rebuilt and upgraded over the past 10 years. Now it was a weapon of terrifying efficiency. All batteries focused fire on capital ships, Daehan ordered. Fighters, screen formation Alpha. Let's show them how Earth does this. Human fighters launched in swarms of their own, smaller and faster than the Vryn drones. But these weren't ordinary fighters. Each one was piloted by a crew linked through neural interfaces, their minds working in harmony with the ship's systems. They moved with impossible grace, dodging Vryn attacks and striking with surgical precision. The Vryn had never faced anything like this. They were used to overwhelming opponents through sheer numbers and savage aggression, but human tactics were built around turning enemy strength into weakness. The tighter the Vryn packed together, the more devastating the human weapons became. Plasma torpedoes tore through Vryn formations. Magnetic accelerator cannons punched holes through their bioships. And then there were the new weapons. Technology developed in the 10 years of isolation. Quantum disruptors that caused Vryn vessels to simply tear themselves apart. Viral bombs that infected Vryn biomass and made it toxic to the hive mind. Within 3 hours, the tide of battle had completely reversed. The Vryn swarm, which had seemed unstoppable, began to retreat. Human ships pursued ruthlessly, giving them no chance to regroup or recover. On the Indomitable, Minho watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. Second Fleet began pursuit. Third Fleet established defensive perimeter around Vela Prime. First Fleet with me. We're going after their command vessels. The Union fleet could only watch in awe as humanity's military machine operated with deadly efficiency. This wasn't just superior technology. This was superior training, superior tactics, superior understanding of war itself. Lieutenant Hanako, serving as Minho's communications officer, received a transmission from the Vrin-occupied systems. Admiral, we're getting distress calls from refugee ships. The Vrin are abandoning their positions and fleeing toward the core. Good. That means they've learned fear. Coordinate with Admiral Park's 4th Fleet. I want pursuit groups hounding them every step of the way. The Vrin started this war. We're going to finish it. Over the next 3 weeks, human forces systematically destroyed every Vrin presence in Union space. It wasn't even close to a fair fight. The Vrin, which had terrorized the galaxy, found themselves facing an enemy that fought with cold, calculated brutality. Dahan led the ground assault on the primary Vrin hive ship, a massive organic construct that served as the swarm's central coordination node. His Marines wore combat suits that made them look like armored gods, each one bristling with weapons and protective systems that could withstand environments that would kill most species instantly. The battle inside the hive ship was savage. Vrin drones threw themselves at the human Marines in endless waves, but it wasn't enough. Human weapons cut through chitin and flesh like paper. Human armor shrugged off attacks that would have destroyed Union battlesuits. And human soldiers fought with the intensity that came from generations of conflict on Earth, refined and perfected over centuries. When Dahan's team reached the central node, they found something unexpected. The Vrin hive mind itself, a massive organic brain pulsing with bioelectric energy. It tried to communicate, sending images of hunger, of endless need, of a species driven by instinct to consume. I understand, Dahan said, aiming his weapon. But understanding doesn't mean mercy. You came into our galaxy. You killed billions. That ends now. The central node was destroyed with a precisely placed explosive charge. Throughout Vrin-controlled space, the swarm vessels suddenly went dormant as the hive mind collapsed. Without central coordination, the individual drones were helpless, mindless creatures that could be easily contained. The war was over. Humanity had won in 3 weeks what the Union couldn't achieve in a year. But the harder battle was about to begin. The Galactic Council convened on Vela Prime to formally thank humanity and offer them reinstatement in the Union. The chamber was packed with representatives, all eager to show their gratitude to the species that had saved them. President Yoonji Choi arrived with a delegation of advisors, including Ambassador Yuna Park, who had been present for humanity's original banishment. The contrast could not have been starker. 10 years ago, they had stood here as supplicants begging to remain. Now they came as saviors, as liberators, as the most powerful military force in known space. Councillor Talavin, now officially High Chancellor, addressed the assembly. Humanity, you have saved us. You came when we called, despite the injustice we committed against you. The Galactic Union is forever in your debt. We offer you full reinstatement with all the privileges and protections that entails. President Choi stood and looked around the chamber. She saw gratitude in some faces, relief in others, but also resentment, especially from Vexara, who sat in silence, her mandibles tight with barely controlled anger. High Chancellor, Yoonji began, 10 years ago you voted to banish us from this union. 176 species agreed that humanity was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent to remain in galactic society. You feared what we might become, she paused, letting the words hang in the air. You were right to fear, but you were wrong about why. We didn't become monsters. We became something far more threatening to your comfortable civilization. We became independent. We became powerful. We became a force that doesn't need your permission to exist. Murmurs ran through the chamber. This wasn't the grateful acceptance speech they had expected. When you banished us, we showed you who humanity really is. We didn't beg. We didn't collapse. We didn't fall apart without you. Instead, we built something better. We advanced faster in 10 years of freedom than we did in 50 years under your regulations. We found new allies, developed new technologies, created new societies, all without you. And now you want us back. But not because you've learned anything. Not because you've changed. You want us back because you need us. Because when the Vrin came, you learned that your peaceful civilization was built on a foundation of sand. You learned that all your committee meetings and regulations and careful procedures meant nothing against real danger. Yuna Park, standing beside her, smiled slightly. This was the speech they had been waiting 10 years to deliver. So here is humanity's answer. Yunji continued. We will not rejoin the Galactic Union. We will not subject ourselves to your councils and your votes and your fear-based decisions. We will remain independent, sovereign, answerable only to ourselves. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Vexara stood, her mandibles clicking furiously. You dare refuse us? After we graciously offer, graciously. Yunji's voice cut through the noise like a blade. You offer nothing graciously. You offer out of need, out of desperation, out of fear that the next crisis will find you without humanity to save you again. She turned to address the entire assembly. But understand this. Humanity will trade with any species that offers fair exchange. We will defend those who ask for our protection. We will share our knowledge with those who approach us as equals. But we will never again bow to a council that judges others out of fear rather than wisdom. The age when you could dictate terms to humanity is over. We walk our own path now. And anyone who wishes to walk it with us as partners, as friends, as equals will be welcome. She gestured to her delegation. We're leaving now.